Okay, number one, Blazers role players. They have played well over the past month. Which of them has been most critical to Portland's recent success?
I was told, but right before this, we started doing this by Jared. All of us chose someone different.
Is that right?
Which I think speaks to the effort they're getting from their secondary players during this winning streak.
Yeah.
And that was kind of part of how I started my answer. Was like, before early February, they couldn't get any of these guys really to get on track. You had Shabazz Napier, and that was pretty much about it that you could consistently hope for. And he actually hasn't played that well during the winning streak,
Right.
But everyone else has. I went with Yusuf Nurkic.
Nice.
To me, because the question was in terms of critical to their success.
Yeah.
And to me, he is, since he's come to Portland, I think you can point to his play and directly correlates with wins and losses for the Blazers, probably more so than any other player on the roster. And he's been absolutely fantastic in the last 14 games. He's averaging a double-double, 15 points and 10.5 rebounds per game. His defensive rating is 100. He has been an absolute beast for Portland offensively and defensively during the 13-game winning streak, and then, of course, the loss to Houston earlier this week. And, he had the 4 blocks against the Clippers. He had another 4 blocks against Houston. He's shooting 54% from the field during that stretch. This is the Yusuf Nurkic we all expected coming into the season. This is the one who kind of played at the end of last season, and the Bosnian beast, so to speak, has returned for Portland.
I felt like you were describing Nurkic fever, man.
Exactly, and that's been what we've had. It's just we've been waiting for it all year, and now it's finally, arrived. And the Blazers, once again, are winning, much like they did last year. And there are other guys who have been great. You guys are going to mention 2 of the others. But to me, Yusuf Nurkic, and this will be another discussion, can you consider him a role player
That's
for the
good
Blazers?
question, yeah.
But right now, I answered Yusuf Nurkic. He's been phenomenal.
All right, I want to get into that question.
Okay.
Because I think that I excluded Yusuf Nurkic from consideration for myself.
So did I.
Because I don't consider him a role player. So
I even wrote a disclaimer in my lead-in.
Yeah.
Is he a role player? I mean, what do you guys think?
To me, anyone outside, on this particular team, anyone outside Damian Lillard or CJ McCollum is a role player. Yusuf Nurkic is teetering to me. He's on that cusp of becoming, not an all-star player, but, a really good star-type player for the Blazers, but he just hasn't been consistent enough for me to put him in that class yet. So to me, prior to February, he had been a role player for the Blazers. His play said he was a role player. Now, he's been really good over the last month and a half, 2 months. But to me, that's still not enough time period for me not to consider him a role player on this roster.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit before the podcast. He's playing role player minutes. He's playing only 24 minutes a game. But I think that the reason I don't think he's a role player is because when I think of a role player, it's a player who has maybe 1 or 2 specific roles on the team, and they focus on those 2 things and they do them very well. And I think Yusuf Nurkic impacts the game in a lot more ways than that. And so that's why I don't consider him a role player. You look at his usage rate on offense, it's either 2nd or 3rd on the team. It's him and CJ kind of flip back and forth sometimes. So he's very, very involved in the offense, more so than any of these other role players. And he's integral to their defense. They're a top 10 defense because of Yusuf Nurkic. Because they were one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA last season. They get Yusuf Nurkic to become a top 10 defense, and then they've been one all year this year. So I just think that he impacts the game in a lot more ways than a typical role player does. So that's why I took him out of the consideration for me.
Yeah, that's also a fair assessment. But to me, until he proves something consistently for the Blazers for at least half a season, if not a full season, it's hard for me really to put him into that class. And up until a month ago, most of the time they're closing games with Ed Davis on the floor.
That's true.
That doesn't sound like if Yusuf Nurkic is not a role player, you don't keep role play or guys who aren't role players on the bench in the fourth quarter. Up until recently, that's kind of been the case a lot of this season. So until I see it a little bit longer, I'm not quite ready to make that jump with him. You are right. In terms of the other players we're going to talk about, Yusuf Nurkic does have the biggest impact.
Yeah.
I think that's fair, but for the reasons, all of those reasons that you named at the beginning of it, that's why I can't consider him a role player.
Yeah.
Because of what he's doing, he's in another tier for me.
Okay.
And so I think the standard for Nurk is much higher now, especially now that we've seen him do it a second time.
Yeah.
And so his role is bigger than just a role guy.
Yeah.
That's my thing, but I think it's a great argument just based on minutes alone.
Yeah.
Because what type of starters do you get that are putting in 20 to 24 minutes a game?
Yeah. I mean, part of it, that might be one of the reasons he has been so effective. Jared, I know, argued earlier in the year you need to get him more minutes, but maybe, cutting back a little bit, he's fresher in those minutes.
Quality.
He's out there and
quality
contributing.
over quantity.
Quality over quantity. So maybe that's also been part of it. He's just also playing better.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it could also just be Ed Davis has been that good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And every time Terry Stotts has been asked about this when Yusuf Nurkic hasn't played in the fourth quarter, his answer has always been it wasn't about Nurkic, it was about Ed Davis. And so I think that might just be a testament to how well Ed Davis is playing right now.
I want to hear who your role player is, since Yusuf Nurkic is not a role player for you.
All right, so I went back and forth between Al-Farouq Aminu and Maurice Harkless because you can't deny how impactful Maurice Harkless has been, since the All-Star break. And I think that he'd be a great choice, but I went with Aminu because of his consistency. And I think that Aminu typifies what a great role player is because he's important to the Blazers for two reasons: to play great defense and hit open three-point shots, and he's doing both of those at a better, level than I think he has during his entire career, and definitely during his time at Portland. If you look at his shooting for the season, he's shooting 40.3% from the three-point line on almost 5 3-pointers a game. So it's not like he's just shooting a couple a game. He's a high-volume three-point shooter, and he's shooting above 40%. I think that the question about whether he's, this kind of shooting is a fluke, I think it's been answered because he's done this all season. And his defense is better than perhaps it's ever been. He's so versatile. I think that he can switch out onto any position. I think he can guard effectively 1 through 5. And in the post, he's one of the best post defenders in the NBA. I wrote that down when I was answering this question on KGW.com, and then I went and looked up the stats, and I was surprised that they were even better than I thought. Within 5 feet of the basket, he holds opponents to 55.3%. That ranks 3rd in the NBA. Guess who's number 2? Your guy.
Yusuf Nurkic.
Nurkic is number 2. If you look at
who's number 1? Do you remember?
Yeah, it's surprisingly, it's Luol Deng.
Oh, okay.
I
well,
limit it to...
That's a little different.
Yeah. You should have probably left number 1.
I didn't limit it.
Can we go back 10 seconds before I ask that one?
All right. I didn't limit it to games played.
Less impressive.
I looked at it depending on if you had given up... I'm sorry. If you defended 15 shots or more in a game in that area. And just looking at the top performers and the top post players, that seemed like a good... But yeah, Luol Deng's a weird kind of anomaly.
So Yusuf Nurkic is number 1, Al-Farouq Aminu are number 2.
Yeah,
That's what I'm taking away from that.
We'll go with that. You guys ruined my narrative. Rudy Gobert, who we all know is one of the best defenders in the NBA, he allows 58.4% on those same shots. And Aminu's at 55.3%. So his ability to defend in the post so that the Blazers can play a smaller lineup, a kind of a switchy lineup with him and Harkless at the 3 and 4, is invaluable to the Blazers. So I just went with Aminu because he is an elite 3-and-D player right now, and that's one of the most valuable roles in the NBA, that there aren't a lot of players out there like that.
And to go to your point about defending the posts, Blake Griffin against the Pistons, he was great the other night against the Pistons and defending Blake Griffin, a guy who the Blazers had struggled to defend all year up until that game.
Griffin's had their number.
He has this year until last game, and Al-Farouq Aminu was a big reason for that.
I went back and forth,
same
way that you did, between those two players, with Al-Farouq Aminu and Maurice Harkless. I even thought about Evan Turner and what Evan Turner's been doing lately.
He's been good.
And quite often, Evan Turner is put on their best perimeter player.
Right.
He's asked to do a lot coming off the bench, and I don't think a lot of times his numbers reflect what he's doing.
Yeah.
And I know that it can be frustrating when you see him take that wide open 3 he probably shouldn't take.
But he's
making them, though.
He's making them.
His numbers lately justify him being in this discussion. Is what I'm saying. But with the two, I just felt like looking specifically at post All-Star and that 13-game win streak, the splits on their stats, Maurice Harkless's numbers are way up.
They're incredible.
They are two different players.
Yeah.
And so just based on that, just because there was such a huge difference, I want to say he's shooting, 14 or 15% better 20% better from deep. He's just been a threat again. And so to think about his story from starter to forgotten to back to being starter and what he's been able to do to overcome, I really like his story, and I just think it points to the team's success and what he's doing. The same way that you pointed out with Yusuf Nurkic. Yeah. It's like, where is this all coming from? Bam! And it's, I mean, the numbers are right there. So I don't have a problem with either direction we go on this, because I even Shabazz Napier deserves to be in this conversation. But I think as of late, what Maurice Harkless is doing, I think it is what makes it so special. And coming back to practice today, just a couple of hours ago, that was the main topic. Everyone wanted to hear from Harkless and wanted to hear about him and what's changed. And honestly, I just think it's a comfort thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just
and
him.
A confidence.
It's a comfort and a confidence thing. And those shots are starting to drop because, I asked him, what have you learned about yourself during this ride? Because you've been all over the place, and now you're back. And, it took him a while to think about it. He's like, I can't really say there's one thing. He's like, but just to see me persevere.
Yeah.